So what happens then? I mean, from the contract to the closing, what's going on there, and why does it take 60 days or 75 days?
Okay, so because you're not buying, and by the way, I think we have one participant here, it might be Georgios. Hey, Georgios. And I know he's looking to buy a house. So what's different about what we're going to talk about now, Georgios, as it regards to a building versus a condo or a co-op, is I'm going to talk about the process with a condo or a co-op. If you're buying a house, you put down 10%, you're still going to want to do a couple of these other steps, but there won't be any board review or board approval. So just forget about that, Georgios. Otherwise, everything else will apply. So you've got to sign contracts. If you're getting a loan, you're going to turn that contract in with your loan application to Chase or Wells Fargo or whoever you're going to get a loan from. The seller's broker is going to give your buyer's broker a purchase application for the building. Every building is managed by a different management company. Some buildings, like in Long Island City, Queens, they may have a one-page thing that you have to fill out. There's other buildings that have 15 or 20 pages you have to fill out. In a condominium, again, it's typically less than in a co-op, but you'll want to start to work on your package. It'll include not just how much money you have, but you'll have to back that up by showing bank statements, etc. And at the same time, your bank is processing the loan. At some point, your buyer's broker will get a call, or the seller's broker will get a call saying, "Hey, here comes the appraiser." The appraiser comes in. He'll look at the apartment. Make sure all the four walls are still standing up, make sure that it's not overpriced. 90% of appraisals come in, at or slightly around the contract price, so there's no issues. But once your appraisal comes in, then you will take your appraisal and you will like here now. You have your, you'll take your appraisal, which at that point is going to satisfy the mortgage contingency in the contract. This means now that as soon as the apartment appraises, that the seller is going to say, aha, now at least we know it appraises, we look good for closing. So you're going to take your mortgage commitment, which is going to come another another 2 weeks after the appraisal, if it's a positive appraisal, and that's the kind of the last piece you'll need. So the mortgage approval, as well as your package information, is going to be submitted to the management. Management is going to review everything and make sure that everything matches up. And after that after all that is approved, it's going to be sent to the board of directors if it's a condominium, board of managers if it's a condominium, or board of directors if it's a co-op. In a condo, once you have a mortgage commitment and you're guaranteed that you're going to close with money, the condominium is going to come back with an approval, typically within a week or so. If it's a co-op, even if they like the way things look, they will probably ask you for one final step, which is a board interview.
Right. So it seems like once that contract is signed, there are two things that really the buyers is really responsible for and keeping in mind. One is getting that appraisal done, and that seems to be that's kind of where everything's coming together. Once that appraisal is to the bank's liking, and they say they're going to fund that deal, that is a huge piece of this puzzle between the contract and the close. But the other item note here is the board package. And that's also an area where buyers brokers can be very helpful. It's a lot of work, there's a lot of paperwork. Brokers go through this all the time. They're used to seeing the documentation that is required or necessary. And also, when it comes to the board interview, buyers brokers can be helpful here as well, because they can suss out a certain co-op. They can know kind of the way that things will transpire for that board interview. And do you typically prep somebody before they go into an interview, or at least give them some heads up so that they don't go in?
Sure, we have a list of things, recommended frames of mind. You should be familiar. Again, I'm not sure if the people that are watching are going to be going for a co-op or a condo, but if it is a co-op, your broker should give you a list of, call it the cheat sheet of things to keep in mind. If you're
to avoid polite dinner conversation, right?
Well, you're going to want to be familiar, number one, with your purchase package. So if people start to ask you about that vacation place in Vermont, and say, well, what vacation? It's probably not a good sign.
Right.
So you want to be familiar with your package. They may ask you some questions that you might deem rude or intrusive, but guess what? When you buy in a co-op, you kind of have to take that as part of the deal. You're probably paying a lot less than you would for condo, and that's part of the price that you're paying. Is you have to be a little bit more, forthcoming in terms of your finances and your social situation. Sometimes they'll ask you about where you've worked. They typically don't ask you about politics, but they will do whatever they can to ascertain that you're going to make a good fit for the building. And some buildings have, personalities.
Yes, and do buyers typically, certainly outside the city, when someone's buying a house, they always get the house inspected. Would you say that that's the case here in New York City?
No, and the exception would be if you're buying a townhouse, then of course you would want to get it inspected, check out the plumbing, check out the roof, all of the mechanicals, the HVAC. In a condominium or a co-op, typically you don't need to inspect those things because they have to be in working order per the contract. Number one. And number two, the building takes care of a lot of these systems, whether it be the heating or the cooling, a lot of that is controlled by the building. The roof, the windows, a lot of that is responsible to the building itself. So it is certainly permissible to do a private inspection of these things, but really if there was a problem with the building's boiler or the roof, you probably would have already learned about that in the building minutes, and there's probably going to be an assessment or something, or they were going to be working on repairing it already.
So let's say the appraisal comes in, it's all good, board package goes through, you have the interview, that's good, you get the inspection, it's fine. Let's say the closing date is this Friday coming up after all of this work, after 3 months of work, sometimes 4 months, depending, especially with co-ops, it can be a little longer. What happens? Do people show up at the closing, or do they actually see the apartment beforehand? Is there what they call a walkthrough? Tell us about
Well, assuming you get a contract signed in a week, right? You turn in your co-op or your condo application maybe 3-4 weeks later if you're financing, and then management forwards it to the board. You're in it maybe 6 weeks, and you either get a heads up that you're that the sale is going to be approved if it's condo, or they're going to ask you for an interview if it's co-op. You're probably looking at about 2 months to close. So during that time, the apartment should remain pretty much exactly the way it was from the time you last saw it. And the way to make sure that all that is true is you'll do a walkthrough either the day of the closing or the day before the closing, just to make sure that the walls are there. You want to check to make sure that the toilets are flushing, the sinks are running, there's hot water, that nothing has changed. Now I will tell you, sometimes when you see apartments that have rugs, if the owners have vacated them, when you go to a closing, there might be a huge stain or a burn mark or something
these older apartments
that you didn't see before, and you could have not known because there was a rug there. So that'll have to be hammered out at closing. But those are the kind of things that you want to look for, to make sure it looks exactly like it did before. Subject to tiny little, picture hanging holes and things like that in the wall.
Yeah, that's a good point. When an apartment is vacated, and that there could be these like hidden things that you really haven't thought about with the owner because they're not there. To tell you anything about it, you just find these surprises out on the walkthrough. Conversely, if it is lived in, there's probably going to be movement before you're moving into the apartment. So it could be a few weeks before or a week before the movers came, and next thing you know, they dinged up some walls or they pulled some pictures out that you didn't expect that. So it's important to do that walkthrough.
That's right, and I will tell you that there are certainly minor items that come up. But the majority of closings have little to no issues. I mean, the seller wants the money, the buyer wants the apartment. That's just how it is. And also for minor items, call it less than $500, typically how you address that, you don't stop the closing, right? Let's just say the day before you found out that a tub doesn't work, or there's a fixture that's not working. Typically the buyer's attorney and the seller's attorney set aside $400 or $500 in escrow until it's fixed. So that just means that the seller won't get that extra $500 until the issue is fixed, if it's the seller's responsibility. And most closings go ahead and proceed regardless.
That's right. And either they fix it, or it's just credited to the buyer on the closing. They just adjust the number, so they write up a check right there. I mean,
that's right.
Be any of those
and in terms of money, guys, you put a 10% contract. Let's just use a $1 million purchase. You put $100,000 down, right? Let's just say you're putting 20% down payment and getting 80% financing. You're going to show up at the closing with your extra $100,000, right, to make $200,000. The bank's going to show up with $800,000, and then you're going to have closing costs, which we really haven't talked about, but those are going to be anywhere between 3 and 4% on average. They can be less than a co-op, but it's not just the purchase of the apartment. There are things like title insurance, and of course, if you're getting a loan, you might have to pay an origination fee, which is typically 1 point of a loan. So if you're getting an $800,000 loan, that'll be $8,000.
Yeah, we didn't really want to get into the weeds too much on all those numbers and you know, on this particular presentation, but yes, bear in mind your closing costs range generally between 2% and 4% of the full purchase price, and that isn't, you know, it's just a baked-in number where you're baking in attorney's costs and flip taxes and mortgage or mansion taxes in some cases. We have to talk about that as well when the apartment is over.
But the good news, Robert, we've actually got the closing, and we didn't. I'm sorry, we should say congratulations.
That's right.